We're here in Knistno, Saskatchewan, and we are at Knistno Public School. And I'm Mr. Larson, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Alright everybody, this is part 2 of sanders, and what we're going to talk about today is portable sanders. We're going to talk about hand sanders. We're going to talk about blocks of wood. Why is a block of wood useful? Alright, so quickly, in our shop we have basically 2 different types of sanders. We have portable sanders. We have a finishing sander called a palm sander or a quarter sheet sander. Why is it a quarter sheet? Because out of a full sheet of sandpaper, it uses 1/4 of it. Okay, so looks like this when it's get torn up. That's a quarter size. Now this stuff right here, this is 240 grit. How do I know that, and what does that mean? Well, it says on the back P240, and on this one it's P40. On this one, P1500. So what do those numbers mean? In 1 square inch of that piece of sandpaper, that's approximately how many pieces of sand or abrasive there are in it. So P40, really rough material, it's coarse, it's gonna scratch really quickly, it's gonna take a finish off, it's gonna take off pencil marks, it's gonna shape things really quickly, but it also leaves scratch marks. And so in 1 square inch, there's gonna be about 40 pieces of sand. It means that they need to be bigger pieces. Okay, as opposed to a 240, which is a fine grit, it's going to be really fine, smooth, and that's for polishing. That's kind of your last step, is to polish. 1500 grit, well, this is a wet sandpaper. It's a really well used piece of wet sandpaper. You only sand once there's a finish on it. So you've spray painted it, you've clear coated it, and you want to make it nice and shiny and smooth. It's amazing what this will do. You keep the surface wet, you keep the sandpaper wet. Do a few passes with this stuff just by hand and wipe the water off, wipe the dust off, and it's incredibly smooth. So that's sandpaper. Always work from your lower number, your coarser grit, all the way up to your finer grit, and you'll end up with a great finish. Okay, so that's a quarter sheet sander. To change these, usually there's some sort of clamp on them. So there's a clamp there, clamp here, and then what that does, it allows that to loosen off. Grab your new piece, slide it underneath that clamp, wrap it around, and away you go. You turn to use these, simply turn the machine on with an on-off switch, and it'll start to vibrate. And that's really all these machines do, is at least this one, they just vibrate. So safety-wise, well, really the only safety hazard I can think of with these is sawdust that's getting blown out, and the dust bags on these are always falling off. But so you want to sand with the dust bag on. And the other thing that would be a safety hazard is that you turn it on or you plug it in and the machine's actually on, you don't realize it, and it vibrates onto your toe. So really in the woodworking world, it's about as safe as you can get. Now, next thing that we're going to talk about is a random orbital sander. And random orbital means that there's a center orbit and it's randomly spinning around. It's a little bit off center. It's going to cause it to spin. These are usually hook and loop or a Velcro type attachment to them. So the discs will stick on, and you see that there's holes in them, and those holes will match up with the holes on the bottom of the sander. That's going to allow the dust to get sucked out through and into the dust bag on the back. So when you're putting the disc on, you want to make sure then that it's lined up with those holes. Squish it down really well, and then you turn it on with the on-off switch, same as the other one. These ones, you don't want to start up with it up in the air and then touch it down. Usually it sends the disc flying, and it also will leave some scratch marks on your surface. So you just gently have it on the surface, turn it on, let it spin. While it's spinning then, you don't need to put lots of pressure on it. Let it spin, that's the whole point. Same with these ones. You don't need to put tons of pressure. If it's not working right, then maybe you need to switch a different sandpaper. Just let it, push it around, and let it sand. One side note on these palm sanders is that you need to make sure that you're sanding with the wood grain. Remember I was talking about that if you're using a coarse grit like that P40, it's going to scratch the heck out of it, and if you're sanding across the grain, you're going to see that when you finish it. You may not see it right now, but when you stain that and you put clear coat on it, it's going to stand right out that there's scratches going across the grain. Neat thing about these orbital sanders is that, well, you can't really sand with the grain because it's spinning in a circle, and it doesn't matter what direction you're going with. Okay, so those are really basic, but even more basic is you take a block of wood. Remember I said this? This is a sanding block. Take a block of wood and you either staple a piece on, you just hold it with your hand, wrap the piece of sandpaper around. You can sand. You can get those edges, you can sand the faces of it. Remember I said with the disc sander that you don't want to sand the face of a piece? Well, the disc and belt sander, that's what these are for. They're for sanding the faces, they're for sanding the edges, and they work really incredibly well. So that's the portable sanders. I don't see any resemblance.